The October 24th, 2024 Des Moines City Council meeting is now called to order. Councilmember Grace Matsui will now lead us in the pledge. Please stand if you're able.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So thank you for being here, to everyone tonight, for taking the time out of your evening to come and listen to the issues at hand. Appreciate you being here. To everyone online watching on either a live stream or on Channel 21, please know that we cannot attend to our phones from the dais. So, however, if you have technical problems, please email cityclerk@desmoineswa.gov. That's cityclerk@desmoineswa.gov. Thank you. So let the record show that all council members are present. Do we have any correspondence not previously received by council?
No, Mayor.
All right, thank you. So now it's time for comments from the public. And tonight we also are having a public hearing a little bit later in the meeting. So if you have comments relating to the subject of the public hearing, please hold them until that time so that your comments can be on record for the purpose of that hearing. And that's the budget tonight. So for other comments, please, we ask that you keep your comments respectful, and please recognize that any person who is speaking or acting in a way that's disruptive to the meeting will be asked to leave. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and the city of your residence when you come to the podium. So first up, we have Bonnie Wilkins.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and those watching at home. I'm Bonnie Wilkins, the Director of Community and Administrative Services. As this is Tim's last official council meeting as interim city manager, we all wanted to take this opportunity to thank him and recognize him for doing such an outstanding job this past year. This past year has not been easy, but Tim was the absolute most perfect person to lead us through this transition. A lot of things happened this year. There were unexpected staffing changes, day-to-day issues, and of course our current budget situation. Tim handled every issue with professionalism and a little humor, but always doing what was right for the city. We're all looking forward to Catherine's arrival in a couple of weeks, and we have all been working hard to prepare for her. We are equally excited for Tim to step back into a city attorney role and have a little time to himself. So with that, Tim, we wanted to thank you for your outstanding leadership, which, like a great round of golf, requires focus, patience, and the ability to navigate challenges with both strategy and grace. We all pitched in and would like to present you with a 7 rounds on all 9 public Okie golf courses, cart included. We hope you can find time to unwind and recharge, and we look forward to visiting you on the other side of City Hall. Thank you.
Very sweet. Next up, Steve Quinn. Steve, it looks like, did you want to make public comment on the budget? You had a note here. If you did you want to wait until the hearing?
Prop 1, please.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Buxton, members of City Council. My name is Steve Quinn. I live in Des Moines. I voted no on Prop 1 in August only because I, like others, knew I would have another chance to vote. Meanwhile, I could learn more during the interim. Instead, what I'm seeing are contradictions, or at the very least, a lack of clarity and context with the information. This flyer was mailed out to residents over the weekend saying, if passed, the measure would pay for an animal control officer. But the election pamphlet says it would underwrite a code enforcement officer. So does the April 25th ordinance that received the final council vote. Then again, on Sunday, the city's website said it would pay for community service officer. One day later, it changed to say animal control officer. But the frequent asked question page still said code enforcement officer. Doesn't say all three, or even two of the three. So which one is it? I really don't know. Also, the flyer says passing the measure will convert 2 limited-term patrol officers to permanent roles, plus 2 ARPA-funded limited-term officers to permanent roles, all while retaining 2 current patrol officers. That's a retention of 6 existing officers, and not what the elections packet says, and it's not what the April 25th council packet says. I'd like to know where the extra 2 patrol officers in this flyer came from 5 months later. The April 25th packet refers to only 2 ARPA-funded officers as term limited, not 4, as is in the flyer. The source providing the conflicting information is a single entity. It's the city itself. Also, if passed, the city would hire 4 new officers. Yet we have no idea how many officers the department has. There's nothing here about it. And unlike other municipalities, there is nothing on the city's website about the department, as much as I really wish there were. Again, no context. The website has been updated several times since Sunday to align with the flyer, but not the pamphlet. The voters should never have to go on a treasure hunt for information. Taking that trip leads you nowhere. The voters deserve clear, concise, and consistently accurate information if they're going to make an informed decision this year. Sadly, this discussion the last 5 months really hasn't been healthy for the city of Des Moines. The police are caught up in the middle of a budget dispute, unfairly so. Those voting no are suddenly anti-cop. That's ridiculous and equally unfair. I'm looking forward to an end and a more cordial conversation on this. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you. Next up, Nadia Curtis.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager, staff, attendees, and viewers. Nadia Curtis, a resident of Des Moines. My comments are to voters regarding Proposition 1. Next time you are driving near the Safeways, McDonald's, Walgreens, Bartell Drugs, the Dollar Store, Big Catch Plaza, the libraries, and everywhere else in between in the city of Des Moines. Look and see the people out there who are experiencing behavior and mental health issues. Many are being helped by the GPS team's crisis response specialists. Now, those people will get limited assistance and services if that position is eliminated. So think how your vote will have a definite impact, not just for those folks, but also for the public safety of all residents in Des Moines now and beyond. So do the right thing and vote. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nadia. Lloyd Little.
Thank you, Mayor Buxton, members of the council, city manager, city attorney, and city clerk. And thank you, Tim, for your service to Des Moines. We appreciate you very much. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Masonico. So I want to share an email I received from a community member talking about the Masonico. He believes it can be funded and that we can keep the building, not destroy it, sending toxins out into the water, getting them into our body through the food supply, gets into the fish, into the salmon. Use it as a creative space, like inviting mindfulness leaders from all over the country and having lectures, schools, artist studios, yoga, Pilates, sports, music concerts, music activities, coffee shop, bakery, films, gardening, Des Moines needs creative culture for ordinary, hardworking people, which is very unique and makes everyone smile together, all ages, and happy Des Moines. Thank you, Machiko N. So I think this person, like a lot of community members, has a lot of great ideas. They're really inspired by that space. It's got so much vibrant potential. And I just wanted to share that since George and I and Barbara are the most vocal. We show up the most here at the council, but we're representing that vast portion of the community who really believes in this place, believes in Des Moines, believes in the people of Des Moines, and would like to see something like that. The next part I'd like to talk about, and George will talk about it a little bit too, is just the kind of the geology of the area. George and I have been looking at a lot of photos of the Masonic home, some of the geology back to the 1900s. And it's interesting because in the Zenith neighborhood, it's kind of banked. You have the Masonic home here, and then there's a steep drop off right out once you cross Marine View Drive, and then it's just kind of an angle down like this. Whereas on both sides, if you go north and south, there's big cliff walls, like you see down by Saltwater State Park, or as you get closer to the yacht club. Those houses have big steep cliffs. So we think that's evidence that there was a landslide back there, probably between 1850 to 1900 or so. Plus, there's no large tree stumps, there's no large trees, except on both sides. So that's kind of our reasoning to think, and we think if it collapsed once back then, it can collapse again. And so we think there's evidence to support a lot of instability in that hillside, and that hasn't been addressed in what we believe the draft EIS, and we don't think it's being dealt with for the final EIS, which we hear is coming out probably February or so. So, and one thing the neighbors there are looking into is getting their houses appraised beforehand, so in case anything happens, they'll be ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. Next up, George Pettibone.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor, all of you. Happy to be here again. George Pettibone, Zenith, Washington, Des Moines. Anyway, we're looking at the Masonic home once again, and we're quite fascinated by a big giant crane about 60 feet tall that showed up by sometime in late August, and a great big trailer. Took like 3 days to put the thing together. On 234th, they dug holes by boring down as much as 60 feet straight down, put in a whole bunch of rebar, a whole bunch of concrete, putting in a new house on the edge of a cliff that is vertical, literally vertical, as much as this wall, and it's right next to it. And it doesn't have 15,000 square feet, as I stated 2 weeks ago. The whole thing is very odd. It's been vacant for 150 years. Nobody else wanted to build on it, but they're going to take an experiment with it. And I walk my dog down there every day of the week, and there never was a 3-foot or 4-foot or 8-foot plywood sign giving us land use application. No information was shared within 4 neighbors that live next to it. The man that lives within 40 feet of it doesn't know how the heck he's gotten that. There is no land use plywood sign. So anyway, the next part of it is that after you get done drilling down those 60 feet, we'd like to get the soils reports, because apparently they didn't hit hard pan. So if there's 60 feet of gravel down below that, there's got the same thing in Seattle, and the same thing in Everett, and the same thing up in Canada, found by the Great Vashon Glacier. The Vashon Glacier gouged out Puget Sound all the way, formed Maury Island, formed Vashon Island, formed the West Seattle, all the way down here to Puyallup. And then it peaked out down in Olympia and melted. So when you get done, it's a very strange story. But we can learn from it. We can get the soils reports and find out what it's like at the Zenith Masonic home, and find out how much gravel is down below it, because it's not stable at all. It's like a box of marbles. You pour a box of marbles out on the floor, and it just keeps on going. There is nothing stopping. All those round rocks were formed by the immense pressure of glaciers. So we're looking at this thing and saying that If you look to the Seattle records, you'll find people with giant water hoses and giant pumps sluicing down the hillside with water. And that water was enough to take down 250 to 300 foot tall hills, 7 of them. They call it the Denny Regrade. It completely eliminated 7 great big things that were 400 feet, 300 feet tall in amongst little creek beds and canyons. So if you can squirt it with water in Seattle and flatten it all out, you can flatten out the Zenith neighborhood and shove it into Puget Sound. Thank you for looking into this matter. Appreciate your help.
Thank you, George. Next up, Catherine Barashkoff.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Barashkoff. I'm a resident of Des Moines, and I am here in the capacity as Commissioner for King County Water District 54. And my understanding is that as a public entity, I can receive up to 10 minutes to speak rather than just the 3.
It would be 5.
5. I hope to not go that long, but just to make sure I can address the points. And again, I am representing King County Water District 54 and am here tonight to address 2 issues. The first issue is we are asking the city to delay the action on the proposed tax ordinance. We received information in regards to this tax ordinance on Monday at 12:30, Monday the 21st, from City Manager George. We believe further discussion between Water District 54 and the city should occur before the change is made, in a delay combined with the scheduled meetings to discuss the impacts and options, such as amending the Water District 54's current franchise agreement to include a 6% franchise fee. That this would not only be a responsible way to move forward, but would be in the best interest of the ratepayers. The city is stating its desire within this ordinance to have consistency in how taxes and charges of water users in the city, and this draft ordinance would subject the ratepayers of Water District 54 to a significantly higher tax burden than the Highline Water District and Midway Sewer. It's noted in the ordinance that it contains some misleading language. The 6th recital states that other water and sewer districts are paying franchise fees of 6% of gross receipts. Section 7 of the ordinance then states that the King County Water District 54 utilities would pay a utility tax of 6% of gross income. Initially, it is unclear within these terms for the receipts and within Section 7 that the uses for the term income, but regardless, the 6% of gross income would tax a significantly more revenues in Water District 54 than they do in Highline or what Midway pay under their franchise agreements. As you're aware, the franchise agreements provide that the utilities will pay 6% of the district revenues. So there's a definition of revenue, but I won't read it out. We don't need it if anyone would like to see it, or you can read it within the franchise agreements. But this ordinance as written would not create parity. In fact, the adoption of this ordinance as written would create a different lack of uniformity and would not equalize the burden, as it would place a greater burden of Des Moines residents that receive water from Water District 54. A better approach to generate the city's desired revenues on an equal basis would be to amend the current Water District City franchise agreement, Water District 54 franchise agreement, to include the franchise fees similar to what was negotiated with both Highline and Midway. The second point I would like to make is to address some statements made at the October 10th council meeting by Councilmember Mahoney. A number of statements were made that were confusing to the commissioners and the King County Water District staff. He stated that King County does not have infrastructure and capability to meet the needs of the downtown economic development. He stated that we lack chlorination facilities and that the downtown pipes are 70 years old and asbestos lined. All three of those statements are a little misleading and incorrect. The city, as was talked about at the previous council meeting, hired its own outside evaluators. There was discussion to move forward with the outcomes of that evaluation that stated King County Water District 4 clearly has capacity to meet the needs, current needs, and growth development for the downtown core. The water pipes for the downtown, the mains were replaced in 2011, and we have more than enough capacity to meet the gallons per minute for both development and fire suppression. And those were the results of the outside evaluators that you hired, which it was, is this 5 minutes? Okay, we already have chlorination, and we have had it for a number of years, and I'm not really sure what reference he's making to the 70 years old and asbestos pipes, specifically because the downtown main was updated in 2011. But we're looking forward to the meetings with the Public Works as indicated in the last city council. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, Jim Delvin. Oh, got you. Okay. Yeah, we talked earlier. All right. Thanks, Jim. Diane Hoyer.
Well, good evening. My name is Diane Hoyer from Des Moines, and I serve on the Human Services Committee. And I am here because I am very upset about the impending cutting of our budget. The grants are for the most vulnerable in our community, and I would really like to see it in its entirety. This is the only thing that I believe Des Moines does for the most vulnerable, and I feel very strongly that we should keep the funds as is, and they should not be touched. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Is there anybody else who came tonight expecting to speak and did not realize that you needed to sign in order to speak tonight? All right, thank you. There you go. So that's it for public comments in this portion of the meeting. Next up, we have committee chair reports. We have a couple of committees, but the same chair. So I'm going to turn the baton over to Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, Mayor. The first committee meeting tonight was the Municipal Facilities Committee meeting, and first off, we'll be getting an update soon on LM&N dock. All we did was approve minutes and got a update on the dry stack storage. That it was not a new idea. This whole redevelopment of the marina, excuse me, was brought up in 2003, and there was a great plan put in place then. The team visited marinas from dry stack storages from Tacoma to Anacortes. They figure it's in 2022 that it was $5 to $6 million to build, and it would only take 2 FTEs, and the revenue would be up to $1 million per year, and so more to come on that. And then in the economic development meeting that took place afterwards was the update on SB 520, 5290, which was Senate Bill 5290, requiring timelines for reviews on development plans, and there are financial penalties if you don't review in a timely manner, which council will end up, the bill sets standards on timelines, but there's financial penalties if you do not review them in the time limits of the bill. So staff was basically directed to come to the full council with an ordinance that we will adopt three components that will allow us not to receive those financial penalties, and then bring it back to council within a year's time to set timelines on review for development. So, and that was all I had. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So next up, we have the city manager's report. I'm going to hand the baton over to interim city manager Tim George for one of his last report.
I saved the best for last year, so I'll call up. So we're going to start off with the update on the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, near-term projects, environmental review, and we have the local government relations manager, Dave Kaplan, here to provide a presentation to the council.
Thank you, and thank you, council, for making room on your agenda. I know between trying to adopt your first biennial budget and your comp plan amendments and everything else, this is a really busy year on top of everything else that's happening in the city. With the release of the FAA's draft environmental assessment for the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, we want to share directly with you information about the document and especially how to participate in the public comment process. Why are we doing the SAMP? As many people know, not everybody, it's been a while. 6 years ago, we did scoping on the environmental for 31 projects that would help meet some of the passenger demand for our region. Our region continues to grow. The economy has been strong, and people have been wanting to fly, and it's that demand which is driving the need for improvements being made at the airport. Some key factors in the population would drive the demand include business growth, international business and leisure travel connections, well-paid jobs, companies and schools based here who attract residents, and those are just some of the reasons. As you can see, that's the growth in regional growth as well as the growth in the number of people who are flying. They track very similarly. With the forecasts in mind, the port began developing the master plan. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The airport capacity baseline study, which Puget Sound Regional Council published in 2021, showed a strong correlation between the region's population growth and the airport's activity. Forecast for future demand is very strong, even with new capacity from SAMP, which is assumed in both the PSRC and the state airport capacity planning. There's just not enough capacity at the airport to handle the demand. So with the forecast in mind, the port began developing a master plan approximately 10 years ago, which looks at the entire airport, and it's to develop and propose airport improvements that are needed for future demand. The work is one of the earliest efforts at an airport to include sustainability directly in the planning, not just as an approach later in project design. So the master plan in SEA is termed the Sustainable Airport Master Plan. It actually was built into the beginning. The sustainability component of the plan identified where we build, and how we operate the existing 3-runway operation at the airport. As I noted before, the scoping on the environmental solicited public input on the scoping for the environmental to be reviewed. The FAA started the process and extended it as we went through the pandemic. And then, of course, the FAA has also directed several updates and new forecasts for the draft NEPA as we've gone along, which is now published and, of course, available for public view as of this last Monday. So, as you already know, environmental review under federal and state laws is done to assess how projects, if built, may impact the environment. It compares the proposed action, in this case the SAMP, against other alternatives that could still meet the needs and against a no-action scenario as if no projects were built. The FAA is the lead agency for the federal review under the National Environmental Policy Act, which is the draft that came out this week. In contrast, the Port is the lead agency when we undertake the environmental review under state law. I have a short video to play now.
In 2018, the Port of Seattle completed its Sustainable Airport Master Plan, or SAMP, for Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, or SEA, which outlines the growth strategy for the airport. This plan addresses increasing passenger and cargo volumes through a suite of projects known as near-term projects. Longer-term projects were also identified, which will require planning and environmental review. The purpose of the near-term projects is to address challenges like insufficient passenger facilities and cargo handling and outdated airfield design. By 2032, SEA is expected to serve over 57 million passengers per year. The projects include building a second terminal and roadways, enhancing taxiways, and ensuring that the airport meets FAA standards while improving efficiency for both passengers and cargo. We're also planning for increased fuel storage, including storage of sustainable aviation fuels. These projects are expected to be completed or well underway by 2032. Environmental reviews this year and next are the next steps for these proposed projects. An environmental review is an important process that assesses the potential impacts of a proposed project and no action alternative, and any other alternatives being considered in detail on the environment. It helps determine how the proposed project might affect environmental resources such as air and water quality, wildlife, traffic, and noise levels in local communities. The impacts of each alternative in the environmental review are compared to the no action alternative to determine if the impacts are significant compared to not doing the projects. Impacts expected to exceed regulatory thresholds are considered significant impacts, while impacts under the threshold are considered non-significant impacts. If significant impacts are identified, the review outlines ways to avoid, minimize, or mitigate these effects, ensuring projects can proceed responsibly while protecting both people and the environment. If impacts cannot be mitigated below the threshold of significance, additional work such as an environmental impact statement will be required. The environmental assessment performed for the FAA analyzed 15 resource categories for potential impacts and found one with significant impacts that can be mitigated by the port below the threshold of significance. This is surface transportation. To offset the expected transportation impacts from the near-term projects, the Port of Seattle will invest about $40 million in improvements to ensure smoother traffic flow in and around the airport. Detailed information on the findings, the resource categories, as well as how to submit a comment or attend one of our public meetings can be found online at the link in the description of this video or at sampntpenvironmentalreview.org. We encourage you to participate in this important process. Together, we're building the future of SEA.
The draft NEPA document contains 7 chapters and 15 appendices. The appendices all correspond with each of the resource categories under the National Environmental Policy Act. The document is about 270 pages overall, 75 pages of text, and then graphs, tables, and other illustrations. The appendices are substantially more. The total is approximately 4,700 pages. How to access the information at the website, the SAMP-NTP environmentalreview.org. In the upper right-hand corner is a tab for materials. If you click on that, and also there's also a link in the middle of the first block of information, you'll be able to pull up those 7 chapters and the 15 appendices that make up the environmental review. In addition, there are physical copies at the airport and at libraries in Burien, Des Moines, SeaTac, Federal Way, White Center, and Tukwila. We provided as we committed to the community, we provided a 30-day public notice in advance of the start of the comment on the NEPA EA. The public comment period started this last Monday, October 21st, and is scheduled to go to December 5th, 45 days. 30 days is the common amount of time that for a NEPA environmental assessment anywhere across the country. The port asked for 60 days on behalf of the communities, and the FAA responded with 45 days. In addition, there are 4 public meetings that are scheduled. November 12th in Federal Way, November 13th here in Des Moines, the 14th in Burien, and the 16th in SeaTac. And you'll be happy to know that since I know what night council is, that unlike the Part 150, the public meeting for SAMP will be on a night that you do not have a council meeting. There are several ways for people to be able to make comments. They're able to make comments from the website. They're able to make comments by attending the public meeting. There's actually going to be a hearing examiner there to be able to take verbal comments, as well as forms for people to fill out and be able to leave written comments as well. And there are going to be various stations around, so people can go to the stations that with the information that will have the information that they're most looking for. As I noted, how to submit an official public comment. The second tab next to the materials tab at the top allows you to be able to submit comments there online. You can also submit via email to the SAMP email at the top, postal mail to Steve Reibold, head of the environmental work. And then, of course, you can see the date and location for each of the public meetings. The one in Des Moines is going to be at Mount Rainier High School on Wednesday the 13th. Documents which explain the environmental review process, the SAMP, and the public comment process are on the website, including translations available in 6 different languages at the website. And we are running advertising, port newsletters, and social media to publicize the draft NEPA and public comment period. In terms of language access, we have, it's been a high priority for us in terms of our outreach and engagement efforts. And as you can see, translation services are available in several different ways and different platforms. At the open houses, there will be people there to be able to tap into various languages beyond even the 6 that are specified there. This postcard is being sent to approximately 126,000 residential addresses in the Highline area to continue to reach people. You'll note a number of the languages that mentioned before and the back side of the postcard. Next steps, which we expect to see happen this year and next year, are shown here. All the comments received on the draft environmental assessment will be reviewed by the FAA and the Port and responded to in preparation of the final EA. Every comment will be responded to. If the FAA finds the proposed action would have a significant environmental impact that could not be mitigated below the level of significance, then an environmental impact statement may be prepared. If the FAA finds the proposed action would not have a significant environmental impact, then the FAA will issue a mitigated finding of no significant impact, or a FONSI, as part of their record of decision that they would issue. The Port will be conducting a similar environmental review under the State Environmental Policy Act, which has different criteria, a slightly different list of criteria. And the environmental review is reviewed by the Port. I just wanted to go back to this page to make sure you had the information in terms of the opportunity on where to reach out. And happy to take any questions.
Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, Dave, thank you very much for the presentation. It's a really involved process, and just the page numbers are overwhelming to most people that don't know any of the particulars about the airport, and they're starting from scratch. So let me just take one small piece. Do you know the methodology that went into for determining the air pollutant impacts from the increased traffic at the airport, and what the findings were?
I do not. That's one of those questions that can be answered by the people who will be at the public hearing, at the public meetings.
All right. Thanks.
Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. This is more of a request for the Empire. The CTAC, the START roundtable, we have two very good reps from Des Moines, and they ask great questions and they get great presentations. And I could wish, it would be wonderful if those meetings could be recorded. There is nothing, in any way that is one could consider confidential or what have you. And given the need for broader community outreach, you'd reach, as a practical matter, you'd reach far more people simply by having a video than, even, it's wonderful the effort you're putting in, but we live in a virtual world now, and you're kind of reinventing the wheel. The information is there, yeah, thanks.
So, Dave, I have a couple questions. So when talking about the next steps page, my questions will come from that page. So when it comes to the review of the comments from this that are produced in this comment period, when is the review of those comments?
That'll occur after the end of the public comment period, so between December 5th and whenever they get through the anticipated large volume of comments that are anticipated to be received.
I mean, it could be a month, 6 months. You're saying probably a matter of months then.
Yeah, probably a matter of months, yeah.
Who reviews that?
It's the FAA and the Port.
Together, so there's a team that's designated to review it together?
The way that this works is the Port is directed to do the FAA's work on the environmental review. So what happens is the FAA and the Port will wind up reviewing the comments that come in.
But you said the Port does the work and then turns it into the FAA, or?
It's under their direction, yes.
So you'll probably end up doing, meaning the Port ends up doing the work for both the NEPA and the SEPA, is kind of what you're saying? Okay, interesting. Then so we don't know when the determination will be made, it just has to get through review of comments, correct? And then if there is an EIS required, then does this process start all over again where there's scoping and community engagement and then a waiting period until they scope and then, you know, does it start all over again?
I don't know the answer to that. So I don't know what to tell you on that.
Okay,
I think the FAA will review the information and make a determination as to whether an EIS is necessary or not, based on whether or not any significant impacts below the level of significance that is defined by them in federal law for those categories. And so this information will remain the same. The only difference would be the approach they take in terms of how they review things, is my understanding. But I don't know how and
Okay.
when. So, but they would make that determination at the time that they would otherwise issue the record of decision.
okay. Those are my only questions. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around how long this is all it could end up taking, so.
Probably first quarter of next year, sometime first quarter.
For determination, you're saying?
I'm guessing, yeah, because public comment won't end until December 5th, and it'll take them some time to.
And an EIS would have to be complete before you would even begin your SEPA process, correct?
That I don't know.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you. Any other questions? Looks like we're good. Great. Thank you. Very informative. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. Just to add on to that a little bit, you have in front of you a letter that the council had requested, and that's a comment period extension request seeking to extend the deadline for comments until January 15th of 2025. You'll see on the back that's signed by 6 mayors, the mayors of SeaTac, Des Moines, Normandy Park, Berrien, Tukwila, and Federal Way. So we'll be submitting this on their behalf tomorrow morning. And then one more airport-related item. At the last council meeting, there was discussion or request to bring back for tonight a conversation about whether or not the city should create an ad hoc airport committee. I'm really just going to open the floor to the council to have that discussion at the moment and make a decision or no decision on whether or not you would like to have an ad hoc airport committee.
Okay, so just quickly, so the order I'm going to take the questions are going to be, should we form an ad hoc committee? And if we decide we do want to do that, what are the deliverables going to be? And then because then the next question is, what's the composition? If we do it and we have deliverables, the composition will probably be determined by what we want, by the deliverables, right? Who is going to be on this, depending on what we want to come out of it. And so before we even begin the discussion, I do want to say that my take is, if just based on what we've got going here in the next 2 months, if there are no deliverables that will affect this comment period, this task in front of us is this 45-day comment period, I'm going to end up recommending that we delay the formation until after the 31st. We've got like 6 big, hard deadline tasks for the staff right now until December 31st. So, but I do want to open the floor for this discussion and recommendation. Councilmember Mahoney.
Well, I support an airport committee because we'd originally had it with the design that it would review the information for the SAMP, check back and look at what the consultants were going to provide, and then kind of get their input on what our response was going to be. It was going to include members of the public. Of course, the council will be able to see it. I think it's a necessary thing. Now, as far as when it would happen, as long as, like, if all this work from the consultant stuff is in process anyway. So once that's complete, if that happened after we do the budget, soon after, I see it being a couple of meetings possibly for the committee to check against it, see what they say, get the input, make whatever changes, to bring it before the council for our official approval and our response to send out. Obviously, time's going to be short. If it's December 5th, I'm hoping our request is done, and that makes it a little easier and gives everybody a little bit more breathing room. But I do believe we need this committee. And it should, and I know that your second question is about who should be on it, and I'll answer that later.
Okay. Any other input on this, whether we should form one? Yes, Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. You know, I'm not opposed to the idea in principle. I just think it should be remanded to the Environment Committee. We were working on a mission statement to expand into dealing with the airport, and we could develop that kind of mission statement and deliverables, but there simply is not enough time. By the time you put out a process to stand up this thing, the comment period will be here, and so I think if you want to consider an airport committee for next year, I think that's a wonderful idea, but it's just, it would be, we don't have the time to make something that is structured and gets us where we need to go. Recognize that the comment period is not the goal. The comment period is to get you to another place. It's, you know, so this is like the first, it's not even the first inning of a very long game. And so I would rather than, you know, having a hurried response that is, you know, not the most useful. We have some tools in place that we can work with. I mentioned the START because the truth is we have two very good START members right now, and if the public, if the council simply had access to those materials, they're getting briefed all the time from the FAA, from the noise experts. They're really getting the gold. It's just that they are not transmitting that information back to the council. So, you know, one step might be to bring them back. They came to the Environment Committee last month, along with the Burien Airport Committee, and, you know, because they already have the information and they've been working on this stuff. They're up to speed in terms of education, far more than we can do in a couple of weeks. So, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Well, I do think we need an airport committee. We needed it for a long time, and there's no time like the present. I certainly don't want to sit down during the first inning and not even try, even though there are some pretty hard deadlines. It sounds like we've got some resources that can be tapped into if we can get the focus enough in order to work up a reasonable response from the city, whether the timeline for the comments are extended or not. But I think we've got to try, and I think it's foolish not to. So I would support an airport committee.
Other comments? Councilmember Harris.
Well, just understand that there is nothing precluding anyone from the public, any subject matter expert, from entering into the comment process. And in fact, you know, most of the time, the members of the public attend the START who are not official members. And so there already is a body of people who are educated and do have the acumen. And I'll just close by noting that if you looked at the, you know, we can argue on the page count, but it's over 4,000. Over half of it are expert comments from the prior period. They are still relevant today, and it would be, I'm just, for anybody who looked at the Des Moines Creek West hearing last week, passion is a wonderful thing, but this is a legal process. It is an administrative process, and people who are up to speed will have the most impact on it. And we have the tools in place. By the way, we can bring back King County Public Health. They did the definitive study on community impacts, and I'm sure they would be happy to help us if we wanted to organize a town hall meeting to gather the public together. I think that's the fastest way to get the largest number of people up to speed if the will is to get as many members of Des Moines into the game as possible. Have a town hall, bring back public health, and yeah.
Okay, so for clarity, I think my vote is going to be determined on a deliverable. So I just want to be clear on what the expectation for forming this committee is at this point. Not long-term, but do we have something specific that those who want this want to produce by December 5th? So, Councilmember Mahoney, you talked about, are you expecting to come out of that committee with a list of comments that will represent the council's position, like a council response to the SAMP?
I'm looking for a combination of the public, us, our consultants, and everything else. What I'm looking for, my outcome is that we have a group of people that are informed, and when we talk about the makeup, I'd explain that. But the idea is that it's something where through our consultants and all of the information we have for our response for December 5th, we've had a group to check that and to say something so everybody feels good about that. And obviously what they would do would come before the council for an approval, I assume. I would expect that.
The committee?
The committee. It would be the output. But a lot of the work's being done anyway to the response. But having the component of our public, our START members, a couple of other people, including a few council members, to just take a good look at it and then bring it before the full council for approval. That is the deliverable on this particular piece. As far as down the road and so forth, with airport committee, I see work there on a continual basis. But this is a specific group. I watched the council or the committee meeting, and one of the big call-outs was, Joe Dusenberry said, we need the public comment. We need the public interface, and it was definitely necessary. I thought it was a component that is essential. We have a lot of people who've been fighting the fight on this, and they deserve a chance, if they're accepted into this committee, to have a say. And I think we could get a cross-representation in the community and deliver a message by December 5th. I mean, I'm hopeful that they'll extend it, which bought more time. But the fact is that would be the first priority. After that, I think there's some determination on what it could be used for and what the members would be. But right away, I think we need this.
A list?
Yes.
A list of comments.
I disagree with Councilmember Harris. I thought most of the meeting was him honestly talking and of word salad, and the rest, it was only about 5 minutes of anybody else's input. There needs to be a balanced approach. And, we need many members in this. I think I need a committee of, say, 10 people that looks at it and checks it against what we'd hope it to say, is what I want an outcome for.
Okay, Councilmember Oxiger.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And this is a question for the city manager. Given the monumental tasks that we have to undertake before the end of the year with regard to the budget and all that, what is our capacity to stand up staff in order to handle this?
Well, we got a lot going on, that's for sure. The council requested at the last meeting to have this discussion tonight. We are working on the comments on the SAMP right now. I mean, we have our SEPA official working on it with the other SEPA officials from neighboring cities, with the consultants that are on board right now. So, I mean, at the staff level, this work is happening at the moment. So, committee, no committee of the council, we're currently doing the work. So, I mean, I think, you know, if the council wants to create a committee, let's do it, and we can update you on what's going on. If the council doesn't want to create a committee, the work's still gonna be getting done. I mean, we fully intend as a city to aggressively review and comment on this process. And we actually have experts on board. So I think, you know, the council piece, certainly reviewing what's happening, providing input, but, you know, we do have experts that are working on this at the moment.
Okay, but given that, and given the additional requirements of having, you know, public comment to the council stuff, and what's on our plate for this time, is it realistic to expect us to be able to do this in a little over a month?
To create a committee?
To come up with a deliverable?
I mean, the time is tight. If we're looking at timeframes of appointing community members to a committee, I mean, we only have so many meetings before December 5th, right? We have one on the 21st, and then we have one on the 5th. So, you know, not great timing, no.
Is there an option of increasing the meetings?
Council meetings?
Yes. In order to accomplish this?
Well, you have a meeting on the 14th that's a study session. I mean, maybe we could add something to that. We also have Thanksgiving as a Thursday, which I traditionally take off.
And I'm going to be a
Of course, you will be not in a position of having to.
So, no, I mean, it's not great timing. I mean, I think that's why the mayor signed this letter seeking an extension from the port is, I mean, you know, 16 appendices and all that stuff. I mean, it's a long document. And so, you know, it's a lot for it's a lot for someone to read it in 45 days, let alone to respond and then respond intelligently, right? So, you know, if the council creates this committee, we'll staff it. So, and then timing wise, you know, we're working on our response, and our response is gonna be, you know, consistent with the city's approach, so.
Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, and then Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, in terms of deliverable, it's about the comments that we need to make in response to this by December 5th. That's clearly the goal of the committee, is to come up with that. What I'm hearing is that we have staff working on it, and we have some expertise that already exists. That's good. We don't have any means for the public to be included in that yet. A airport committee would provide those means. You know, it basically creates a funnel where we can get nice focused information dealing with just that issue. I hope it doesn't require a lot of staffing. I think there are a lot of public commenting that can be done by the people who are on the committee, so that we're not taking a lot of staff time away, because I do want to be conscious of that. But I think that's what we need to do, is the deliverable is to come up with a statement from the council, from the elected body of this city. And we simply don't have a means to do that yet, particularly when you think of how to get the input from the public on this at this point. Yes, anybody that wants to can go find and make the comments in the big void. Nothing personal about the port, but sometimes it's just overwhelming to a lot of people. But we need to make sure that the city of Des Moines has a good, tight statement and has had some, and as much as possible, public input. And if that means having extra meetings that are not on council nights, that's okay. We can do that. So I think that's the deliverable that we should be looking for at this, and I think it is about trying to figure out how to get the council, the public, combined with what the work that the staff and the experts that they have, consultants that they have doing, and I think an airport committee is the way to do that. Thank you.
Okay. So, Councilmember Harris, I did see your hand raised. It would be the third time. I would like to give a little bit of input
I have you know,
before you get your third time.
oh,
Okay?
blast away, yeah.
All right. So I'm hearing we need a deliverable, which is a set of comments. We are paying not only our staff, but some experts to provide that in the same way that we get information for everything else. And then that would be brought to us for a discussion before, probably at the November 21st meeting, correct? Because,
Potentially.
okay, there's going to be some point where we need to say, yes, we agree on all of this, and it needs to be delivered on or before December 5th. December 5th meeting will be too late because we meet after deadline. So that would we have hired experts to do this already for us. So that would satisfy our process for council members. I think that what we're recognizing here is a need to get the community involved. Now, if we form a committee, what's going to happen is we'll have a few community members involved, but the rest of the community won't be. So what will need to happen after that we get these community members educated and involved, we still need a process to, if we want to gather information and comments from the community and educate them, we have to do something else besides just meet. And are you going to have the time to not only meet, but then ask the staff to produce a community forum or education session? Now, I know the port is providing education like what we got tonight. The FAA is going to provide something. But I think the community needs to hear from somebody who is not the entity that they will be contesting. And so we have already hired experts that can do a good job. I am going to recommend that I agree with an airport committee, but I think it's my personal, with the huge tasks we have on board, that we can create a deliverable without forming this committee right now. I would recommend that we form it in Q1 and that we ask for these experts and our staff to be ready by a certain time, that we can create a community forum and make a very simple, understandable presentation that includes an exercise where everybody either brings their phone or their laptop or piece of paper, and they are able to produce their clear, responsible comments, meaningful, strong, depending on what they think, right at the meeting. So you end up with this huge group of strong comments that are educated because our experts have been there and our staff will be there. That will take the whole component of forming a committee and limited information out of the equation. You still get expert information to the community, and you get a large number of responsible community comments back into the system all in one night. So that is my comment and my recommendation.
Point of order. Are you making a motion?
I'm not making a motion. I'm participating in a discussion.
Oh, well, I
And
was going to second that motion.
We're still, you had your hand raised.
I have
for
a
another-
question, if
Okay.
I may. I believe, I've been trying to get confirmation, I believe that the balance remaining on the consultant contract is something like 70, 75-ish. And so I just want to be mindful that, they ain't cheap, and bringing them in to, as a resource for an independent committee, I'm just following on to your proposal because, they have their plate full developing the comments and, providing a resource for some form of town hall kind of thing would be, I'm wondering if we'd be already bumping up against their billable hours, as they say.
Well, yeah, that's true. They're not cheap. But let's keep in mind that we're contracting with them with 3 other cities as well. So it's not like they're strictly our consultants. So I don't know that we could necessarily invite them on the existing contract to do something just specific for Des Moines. You know, that would be, but we can certainly talk with our partner cities about
That was my next.
some sort of thing. But I don't know that we can, I can't make those commitments here tonight. Those are conversations that would need to be had with our partners. So I think tonight's discussion was limited based on what the council requested at the last meeting about whether or not to start the airport, whether or not to form an airport committee.
Any more comments? Okay, so there isn't a motion on the table. So I would like to make one that we form an airport committee in Q1, and that we lean on our staff and experts to create a strong list of comments from the council. That's item number 2. And item number 3, that we plan a community outreach, education, and comment forum that comes from this city. Whether our experts are there or not, I think that would be much more palatable to staff than creating a committee. Well, let me ask the city manager, would creating a forum and having staff attend with their expertise be less of a time commitment than a committee?
I don't know. We
Can't say.
Yeah.
Okay? I think the community outreach component is essential. So I'm going to make a motion of those 3 items. Okay, any discussion? Councilmember Mahoney.
I have no problem with the airport committee for the first quarter. I just believe that we need a group to bounce off our comments and our responses before December 5th, or if it was delayed to January 15th, all the better. I just think we need to try.
I have a question again for the city manager. Was that part of the plan with with not only our staff, SAMP people, but our ILA experts? Was there already a plan to come and brief the council and with draft comments for us to make a decision on? Was that part of the plan?
I don't believe so, because, we hired these consultants to help us out with responses on behalf of all 4 cities. So I don't know that it was, if we're getting 4 city councils commenting on letters. So I don't know if that was the plan or not. It would certainly make things more difficult if we had to get 4 council approvals on a comment letter. I think the important thing to remember is that we hired the experts and gave them a directive of what they should be doing. And so, I think that's what you hire experts for, is for their expertise and to go do the work that you've asked them to do. But, we can, we're very early in the process. We just started meetings with the SEPA officials and with the consultants. So, it just started as, this opened up on Monday. So, maybe we can provide a better update next week.
You can tell that there's a desire from the council to produce our comments responsibly in front of this, especially in front of this community with the tension that has been in the past and currently. So you can tell that's a desire here.
Well, nothing would stop, the council can
Yeah.
create, the council could start working on comments as soon as they wanted to.
Well, and then we're back to the best way to do that is a committee, and I think that we're trying to look for a way to, how do we get that information? If somebody's already working on it, how does it get presented to us?
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, what we prepared for tonight was the question of, are we gonna start an airport committee? So all other issues, if that's something council wants to put on a future agenda, we can do that. But the question tonight, based on the last council meeting, was should we form an airport committee?
That is the question, but the determination is the deliverables. That's what we want. We don't really it's not that we want an airport committee, we want deliverables. And we're looking for the best way to get it. And I think that some council members think it's a committee, some council members think it's a briefing. And the best way to get the community involved is something public. And so we're trying to figure out in this time.
Point of order, I mean, you have a motion on the floor that's been seconded, so.
We're trying to get advice from the city manager.
We're in discussion
Yeah.
for the motion.
Well, I would just say, the council, tell us what you'd like.
I would
Okay.
call the question on the motion.
Okay, so, all right, Councilmember Mahoney.
Just one more comment. The fact is that we have the experts, and I understand that. But the element of those, one of the things that through all the airport I attended all the old airport committees and so forth, and a lot of START meetings. What was never seemed to be captured was the impact for those people that live under the airport, like what they're enduring. And I want to be able to get that piece somewhere in the response. That's all. I think, and that's what they want to share. The noises, the chemicals, the aviation fuel exhaust and all these other things, the ultrafine particulate. It's just, is that going to be a component there? That has always been the story of a lot of the people, and I know a lot of us have attended the meetings and we've heard these concerns. My concern is those would not be included in our response, because an expert who lives somewhere, they understand airport and they'll give some factual basis, but does it have that human element? And having a chance to see that or have some people check it before it goes forward, I think is crucial. At least it's worth the try. I understand the timeline makes it really difficult, especially with the full, table we've already got set.
Yes.
That's why. I'm going to support your motion. It's just, I think the question is, I think the majority of us want the committee. The question is when? And you want Q1, and I just don't know if we can wait that long, is all I'm saying.
Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, I think the key piece, at least what I'm hearing, and to me, is that we make sure we have a way to get the community input.
Yes.
If a forum is the best and most efficient way to get that done, fine, I can support your motion. But I do want to make sure that we have a means to reach out. It's part of the ongoing discussion about transparency and responsibility and reaching out, is to make sure that we get the public input on things. And we need to do a better job than we have been. That's abundantly clear. So if the commitment is to do the forum, and that seems to be the most efficient way to do it, then let's make sure we do that in a time frame that gives people in the community the opportunity to tell us about what it's like to, wake up with particulate matter on their cars. What are what are they experiencing at Mount Rainier High School in terms of, airborne illnesses and things like that? That's the piece that we have to make sure is included, and that has not been before. So, so long as there's a commitment to do that, I can support your plan for a forum if you think that's the most efficient way to get it done.
Okay. Any comment? I haven't heard it, just making sure. Okay, and do you have one more thing that you'd like to
I
mention?
called the question, and so
Okay.
just parliamentary, and just FYI, for the port is doing the heavy lifting. They are going to send a postcard to every person drawing breath in the area, I believe, and they have the public meetings. So they are we can lever on their work. I'm just saying, it's not nothing, the effort that they are putting in. It's just up to us to put something on top of it that represents our point of view. We're not starting from zero. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so it looks like Councilmember Oxiger.
With regard to the notification, Dave Kaplan said that Highline communities were being notified of this. If we could get a clarification, are we talking about, when you say Highline, it's because the confusion with Highline School District versus Highline, or Federal Way School District stuff, are we talking about everybody in the city of Des Moines will be receiving the postcard notification? Because it affects all of us.
It's 126,000 residential homes from White Center down to Federal Way.
Okay, down to Federal Way or including Federal Way?
Including Federal Way, yes.
Okay, well, it's,
Yes,
we do extend,
yes,
south into-
they're not technically Highline, but they've been part of the Highline Forum forever. They've been part of START. They've been part of, Federal Way's been included all along, so.
Thank you for the explanation. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a motion on the table, got a second, we have a plan. All in favor, raise your right hand. Looks like it's 7-0.
Great.
So
Thanks.
we can
Yep.
confirm a plan, talk later.
My next item, I would like to ask Rochelle Caton to come up to provide a human services update.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council. Tonight, I am providing a brief update on our human services. Typically, I would be presenting and bringing forth the funding recommendations from the Human Service Advisory Committee for the next 2-year cycle. While this funding availability is still uncertain, we wanted to showcase the work of this committee. They have been working very hard to make proactive cuts to conserve the budget while still supporting the programming that we know is the social safety net to our community. How the committee came to these recommendations was after many meetings and even additional meetings that I asked them to attend, and they graciously accepted to further consider reducing the budget. And as you heard from public comment tonight from one of our committee members, any reduction in human service funding is honestly a really hard pill to swallow, but they worked really, really hard to still work hard to figure out how those dollars could be the most effective within our community. So we appreciate them. And while we will not be asking for a vote from you this evening, I will be providing this update with the hope to return to council for approval if funding is available. Okay. So if you'll allow, essentially, we do this presentation every so often, but I did want to just take a quick minute to backtrack a little bit to tell you just a little bit of how our human services works here in Des Moines. So what is human services? Human services is a social safety net for basic needs. So in short, where there are humans in a community, there will always be the need. And why a city should support these efforts, essentially it's supporting the well-being of our residents and often the most vulnerable residents. We as a city do not provide direct services. We don't have a domestic violence shelter. We don't staff our food bank. We partner with nonprofit agencies that do provide these social services to our community as they are the experts. So a little bit more about our process. We, the City of Des Moines, participate in a Share One application. So this is a common human service application that is shared by 16 other cities. Essentially, if you are a nonprofit and you would like to apply for funding, we try really hard to make it easy with this one shared application. Everybody's criteria is the same, and essentially it's just to make it easier for these organizations. So in order to be considered for funding, I won't read all of these, but they need to be an established 501c3. They need to be willing to accept funds on a reimbursement basis, and that's pairs with the scope of work in our contracting and the terms that we come to. So in this funding cycle, we received 73 applications with a total funding request of over $800,000, which is pretty common to have much more need than any cities have. And that's where all the work comes in from our Human Service Advisory Committee. So how we determine who gets funded, that's the tricky part. At first, staff, we will review all of the applications and we'll remove any applications that essentially would not make sense or would not serve our community. Most of that has to do with proximity. For example, if an organization in Bothell applies, it wouldn't make sense for our city to fund them, though they probably do great work. Aside from that, we have funding priorities. I will read these just because they're important. So secure affordable housing and food adequate to meet their needs, safe from violence within their families, neighborhoods, and communities, healthy physically and mentally. We focus on education, job skills that lead to employment and living wage jobs. And then obviously childhood education and youth success. And this last one is important, and we keep it on there just because the heart of our Human Service Advisory Committee is always wanting to know and understand what's missing, what are the gaps in our community, where is there need that we need to know to address. So we keep that on there as a reminder of always wanting to engage with the community and better understand their needs. So looking back, here is the last few years and the funding. If we go to 2023 and 2024, the funding was $250,000 per year. We funded 24 agencies with that amount, and this increase was due to the allocation of the ARPA funds. 2025 and 2026, our request is just shy of $140,000, funding 19 agencies. And then I'll touch on this in a few slides, but there are a few agencies that could potentially qualify for the use of the opioid funds, and that would further reduce it to just shy of $125,000. So there are 19 agencies that the committee is recommending to fund. This was the very challenging part, is there was so much discussion within our committee of, while reducing the budget, potentially not taking on any newer organizations, but rather funding the organizations that we have an established relationship with. Just essentially it would be cutting the pie in more slices. And we know these agencies do incredible work in our community, so that was the discussion back and forth of should we take on new agencies or continue to fund the ones that we have been funding and we know that they are very effective in our community. So those were hard decisions. So down the Health Point, the medical care, so this is one of those organizations that could potentially qualify for the opioid funds, and we'll get to that more. Moving down a little bit, also pediatric interim care, this is another one that could potentially qualify as they provide infant withdrawal program. Okay. So this graph just shows a little bit, as you can see, the housing, food, job training, education, youth success takes the larger chunk of those funds. Always, historically, the food bank typically has been our largest contract. And then moving down a little bit further, violence-free, survivors, support services, these are things like King County Sexual Assault Resource Center, domestic violence services, crisis lines, and then you move to physical and mental health services. That really small green slice of the pie is what I mentioned previously, and that's the Share One application. That's just the admin fees, and the City of Kent manages that for us. Okay, so this is just a very, very broad overview of the opioid funds, but essentially, Washington State and local governments will receive significant funding over the next 2 decades, and this was based on lawsuits for manufacturing, distribution, and marketing. These lawsuits filed are being settled and then finalized in bankruptcy courts. Most of these settlements and bankruptcy funds will be shared by Washington State and its counties. And then the criteria for that is cities and counties with population over 10,000 residents qualified. So the city of Des Moines entered a MOU to receive these funds, thus agreeing that we ourselves would not pursue litigation independently. So some approved uses, and this is just some of them, so there are quite a few, and it also kind of depends on which settlement that it is from, but basically first responders, training, prevention, harm reduction. So a few of our nonprofits would qualify for that. And of course, a special thank you to our Human Service Advisory Committee. We really appreciate their volunteer hours. Our committee members have significant background in social work, education, human services, so any meeting with them is amazing because they have so much to share and so much wisdom, so it's wonderful to have them. Let's see. Oh, as always, we welcome any community members who are interested in joining our advisory meetings and committee. That is on our website, and they can apply there. So, any questions?
Councilmember Oxiger.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we go any further, I'm the liaison to this committee, and I am so impressed by the amount, one, of expertise, but also the dedication and, quite frankly, the agony that this committee has gone through, having to pare down, the number of requests and, working first from a standpoint of thinking that there was going to be $250,000 to help these people and to have brought it down to 140, slightly less than 140 and stuff. I can't say thank you enough to the members of the committee and their work, and for Rochelle too. I think when we review what citizen input is, and the time and and in this case the emotional impact of what this was having is incredible. So I want to make sure that you're recognized, the committee's recognized, and let the council know that from my standpoint, they did an absolutely outstanding job.
Fantastic. And I was the liaison before Councilmember Oxiger, and ditto on all points. So impressed with everybody who has been on that committee and your leadership from the staff, helping to guide the ship and the work to vet these organizations and then to keep them accountable. It is a lot of work, and I'm so impressed also. I do have a question. If the committee ever wanted to take on the task of some grant writing, is there anything, do we know if there's anything that would prevent just that committee from being able to write a grant on behalf of the city of Des Moines and be able to spend it on human services? Do we know?
Well, I'll just note, so grant approval requires council approval.
Okay.
So, anytime you have someone writing grants, you want to make sure that it's incorporated into our plan so that we know if there's a match or what the implications are. Is there going to be staff time required? Certainly if there were grants that were identified that the city could be eligible for, if the committee wanted to assist in writing a grant, that would be great. But I don't think we would give somebody autonomy to go out and apply for grants without, being in touch with our staff to make sure it fits.
So if somebody found something, they would go to you and you would come to the staff or to Tim or the legal and ask about that. Just might be, if somebody thinks that would be, something like that would be fun sometime, but, okay, that was the only question I had. Great work, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Is that all we have?
That concludes my report, Mayor.
All right, thank you. So moving on to consent. I'm gonna move to the page here. So would the clerk please read the consent agenda?
Item 1, approval of vouchers. Item 2, approval of minutes. Item 3, Des Moines Creek Restoration Project, Local Agreement 5, Interlocal Agreement 5. Item 4, King County Flood Reduction Grant Amendment. Item 5, Grant Acceptance Passenger Ferry Study. Item 6, 2024 Senior Activity Center Upper Roof Replacement. Item 7, Pet License Fee, and that concludes the consent calendar, Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Nutting?
I move to approve the consent calendar as read, Mayor.
Do I have a second? Second. Councilmember Mahoney has a second. Is there an item that a council member wishes to pull? Councilmember Harris?
Thank you. Item 5, the passenger ferry grant acceptance.
All right, any others? Okay, so we'll be considering consent items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, is there 8? 6 and 7. All in favor, raise your right hand. Looks like it's 7-0. Thank you. Councilmember Harris, go ahead on your question about number 5.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, who turns down free money? I forwarded a copy of the 2020 study. It's I just will never support anything involving this ferry. And we have an extremely long meeting, and so I will not belabor the point. So unless we want to have, you know, a discussion, I just pulled it in order to vote no, and thank you.
All right, any other discussion or questions in regard to that item? If he's going to vote no, I'm open for a motion. Who would like to make the motion? Councilmember Nutting?
I move to approve the federal interagency, I'm sorry, my contacts all of a sudden went blurry, interagency agreement accepting the grant funds of $160,000 for passenger ferry service study and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement substantially in the form presented.
Do I have a second? Deputy Mayor Steinmetz. Any other discussion before we move forward? All right, all in favor, raise your right hand. Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, Councilmember Oxiger, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Grace Matsui, Councilmember Mahoney, and myself, all opposed. Councilmember Harris, it passes 6-1. Thank you. All right. Moving back to my page. Thank you for your patience. All right, next up we have a public hearing. The purpose of this agenda item is for the City Council to hold a public hearing to consider the 2025 to 2026 biennial budget. I will now open the public hearing. We will begin with a staff presentation with Finance Director Jeff Friend.
I got back from the bathroom just in time. Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Deputy Mayor, members of the public, staff. This is the first reading of the 2025-2026 preliminary biennial budget. The budget book is in the packet tonight. It is also found on the finance page on the city website. Before we get started, also in the agenda item, you can find a list of updates from the budget that was submitted on October 1st. Those updates are involve mainly updating interest revenue across various funds. The amounts were just too low. There's also a number of items that were just missed that needed to be included. It's like fuel sales in the vehicle maintenance fund, and some expenses in the waterfront zone, so those are added in. So most of everything that might say increased probably wasn't there, so it's not, we weren't adding to anything. We were just bringing those to be included. And another item, as we talked about the SAMP earlier in the meeting, the breakout of 10% of the sale proceeds from the piece of land connected to the Business Park West project had been requested to be set aside. So that's $69,000 of professional legal fees regarding the SAMP was set aside from the $690,000. Okay, and if you haven't had a budget presentation in the last 48 hours, you're in luck. So what's in the budget books? This is the structure of the budget books. I figured that there's a little bit more public interest in the budget this year than usual due to the financial issues of the city. So it'd be good to introduce people who might be unfamiliar with looking at a budget book to provide information on what can be found in there. So the basic structure is you have an introduction, there's a budget overview, then it will talk about the funds, give you summaries about what those funds are, followed by departments of the general fund, and then at the end, there's a section on debt. So if you're interested in how does the city pay back, certain bonds or loans, what are they used for, that's found in the back. More specifically, what you can find in a budget book, you will find, of course, the budgets for each fund and department. You find a position summary schedule and an index of salary, pay grades, and positions. So the position summary schedule, if you happen to be interested in, say, how many patrol officers are in the police department, you can find that in the budget book. If you want to look at the pay grades of the city, you can see that. You can see which positions are in which pay range. Also included are organizational charts for departments and also financial policies, descriptions of the budget process, and 5-year forecasts. What's new this year is, as been mentioned, we are doing our first biennial budget. So we have budgeted for 2025 and 2026, which really means next year, instead of doing a 2026 budget from scratch, we'll already have a framework, and then we'll review and update from there. So it saves staff time every other year. Also, we want to apply for the Government Finance Officers Award for Distinguished Budget Presentation. That involves really bringing up the budget book to a higher professional standard than it has been at. One of the pieces of that is including city and department goals, strategies, and accomplishments. So being that the budget is, taxpayer dollars, it's nice to know, for the taxpayer, what are you trying to do with my money and how good are you at doing that? Which leads into performance measures and long-range financial plans. So those are no new pieces in the budget. We're probably a little bit stronger at the first one than the second and third right now. So we'll see if we get the award, and if we don't get the award, they'll specify really the steps we need to take to get it on the next round. But we're on the right path of getting that into a more informational document for the public. And then finally, I mentioned the debt service information. That's something that we've enhanced to provide a lot more clear information. Budget challenges. This is almost the exact slide from the 2024 first reading presentation with just a little bit of editing. Our budget challenge has been general fund sustainability, aligning expenditures and revenue. So the primary issue, of course, is costs increasing at a faster pace than revenue is. Two issues related to one-time funds is the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. Those funds are running out, so I believe we have some in the Marina Steps project, and then after this year, that's probably all that will be remaining. And Sound Transit funds, we will be getting mainly about $30,000 from Sound Transit in 2026. So those funds are also expiring. So one-time money is not going to be available to be relied upon. Not that we should rely upon one-time funds, but they have been helpful. But they won't be available to be helpful going forward. And then also increased costs, our WCIA insurance, if you remember, for 2024, that was a dramatic increase. It went up a little bit to about $1.2 million for 2025. Good news is that SCORE had been on this slide last year, but due to our reduced usage and Auburn's increased usage, that will lower our cost for SCORE. So they went from almost $1.1 million for this year down to about $790,000 for 2025. So it was nice to see something actually, go in our favor during the budget process. Increased costs, we have a cost of living adjustment in the budget for the Police Guild and Teamsters. We have that at 3.8% because that was the Seattle CPI in June, which is the metric that we use for COLAs. For non-represented and the Police Support Guild, we have them in the budget at 3%. And we also have vehicle replacement. That has been something that the last few years through the pandemic, the general fund has retained that money and not set it aside for other vehicles, which the result of that is you can get through the pandemic, but you're digging a hole. We couldn't dig the hole any deeper, so we are fully funding vehicle replacement as it should be from the general fund. And what that'll do is getting out of that hole, it will reduce the amount each year going forward that we're going to have to set aside. So a lot of discussion has been about our budget deficit. After we pulled together all the information from the departments, all of the budget requests, we had a presentation on September 25th. We referred to this as point A, so this was our starting point. Once we have the data together, this is what we started to work on. So for 2025, the deficit in that presentation was nearly $4.6 million, and in 2026, it was about $4.3 million. Tonight, in the budget, those deficits are smaller through the implementation of some budget strategies. For 2025, it is $725,000 of a deficit, and 2026, nearly just a little under $1.4 million. Now, there's a way that this is presented in the budget book itself. So in the budget book, you'll see for the general fund that revenue and expenditures are equal. And the reason for that, and this is accounting, so please bear with me, this will be the worst thing you'll have to endure tonight. Revenue, you see, is the $25.687 million, but we take that deficit and we assume that there will be cost reduction, staff reduction. And so if that is implemented, then that will align the expenditures with revenue. So we kind of roll that up into the expenditures. So the expenditures are still there, the 26.4, and then the savings of the $725,000 in 2025. So that's assuming you're implementing that plan, and then that will result in your expenditures being the same amount as your revenue. So the budget book does take a page to explain this, and we do, in the next couple of slides, you'll see we have two forecasts that present this each way. So we're showing the deficit, but then we're also, on the accounting side, we're saying, okay, well, we're going to implement this plan, expenditures will be the same. And the difference will be zero. If everything goes according to plan, which of course, that always happens. 5-year forecast, so this is, I mentioned each version of the forecasts. So this is the 5-year forecast as if we didn't do any cost reduction. We're okay with that $725,000 deficit and the $1.4 million deficit. So if you look in the 2025 and 2026 columns down to the row that says change in fund balance, which is just above the yellow in the row below, you can see the change in fund balance is that, drop of $725,000, and in 2026, the 1.396. The yellow means that we are below the 16.67% threshold, but we're still above zero. So technically, according to the state's definition of a balanced budget, we could say, well, this is a balanced budget. But anybody who would look at this forecast and see all the red to the right of the general fund balance being below zero, nobody would want this. So we can technically say it's a balanced budget because we haven't overspent our fund balance, but obviously there's problems. This is the 5-year forecast with the cost reduction. So if you see where that 725,000 was, now it's 0. Our revenues and expenditures are equal. The cells below are still yellow, the 4.154 million in both 2025 and 2026. So again, we are above 0. We are slightly less than the 16.67%. We have yellow going through 2027 through 2029, and then again to 2030 and 2031, fund balance goes below 0. Now this assumes that the current trends, stay. So that this assumes that your costs are still growing at a faster pace than your revenue. So it assumes that expenditures are growing at about 3% and revenues, around 1%. But really, I think the takeaway here is even when we do the cuts, there's still structural issues that need to be addressed. And then if you just keep cutting and cutting and cutting without raising any revenue, then you're just going to get to a point where you realize you need revenue, or your service level is so low that it's no longer relevant. I don't know what that point would be, but we don't have green over there. So obviously that's, there's still more work ahead, even after the city does budget cuts. And of course, this would also presume that the cuts that were made in 25 and 26 are the minimum cuts. So it could be, up above in those columns of 2025 and 2026, where it says net activity, you still see it's negative. So, it could be that we have to cut more than just the minimum. But long story short, the work is not done even after the minimum cost and staff reductions. Budget strategies. These are strategies on this slide have been implemented or in process. So council has approved a raise in business license fees in 2025 for in-city and out-of-city business licenses that we estimate will bring in about $100,000. Utility tax on non-franchise prohibited utilities, you heard mentioned earlier. Bring senior services in-house, reorganize recreation services, events and facility rentals department. Had a savings of $200,000 in the budget, so that's council had approved ending the Wesley contract for senior services, and that is now going to be done in-house by the city itself. And then, of course, we raised business license fees again. So I have it on there twice. Other budget strategies, one, as we heard about human services earlier, and I did want to make mention of my comment at the town hall the other night. I had a misunderstanding of the conversations had with the Human Services Committee, made a comment that, oh, well, they have more funding than they can spend, which was grossly inaccurate. So it's not my desire to misrepresent other people's feelings or positions on things. So, I apologize to the committee. I'm really thankful for Rochelle's very excellent presentation this morning. So sometimes, you can listen to Rochelle instead of me and be better off. But that was a reduction of $100,000 in the budget from the 250 to the 150. Decreased city manager professional services. We decreased it from 175,000 down to 80,000 for a savings of 95,000. And Burien Cares contract for animal control would save $100,000 a year. Freeze IT director, senior events planner positions, combined saves $303,000. Eliminate the finance intern position, which was $31,000 a year, and also end budget software subscription, which originally we thought would be for 2026. It's possible we can also do that next year, which would make me happy because I'd like to fire them. So that was an easy one to do, and I don't know if we want to stop on this slide for discussion or keep going. Keep going, okay. Other items were able to move between funds. So the general fund was making a bond payment from the general fund on the 2018 bonds. We're going to pay that with REIT in this proposed budget, and that will free up $226,000 from the general fund. It also, of course, contains retaining one-time tax. One-time tax is from construction projects whose permit costs are $15 million or more. We separate that out, and typically, I don't know typically, but the intention is to separate those taxes, that sales tax and that B&O tax, and then transfer it out of the general fund into a construction projects fund that holds that money, and then use it for capital projects. A lot of the times, you know, in tough times, we tend to hold that in the general fund, and in the proposed budget, that's what is assumed. Move software and hardware purchases from general fund to the computer replacement fund. So there's a fund where the general fund and a couple others set money aside for IT replacement items like computers, whatnot. And we're going to move that out of the general fund and back to the computer replacement fund where it was located a few years ago. We're also going to retain a little bit of the funds that we send over there into the computer replacement funds for $100,000 savings. And then move franchise fees from street pavement fund to the general fund. So there's a street pavement fund that was receiving a portion of franchise fees from utilities. The Redondo speed enforcement cameras provide the city revenue. That revenue is highly restricted, but it can be used for street pavement. So essentially, these franchise fee revenue of $583,000 can be moved out of street pavement and into the general fund, and then be replaced in the street pavement fund by the revenue from this Redondo street speed cameras. Other strategies was to eliminate the city currents, which was $60,000 a year plus $20,000 of postage. We reduced the cost of living adjustment in the budget for non-represented employees from 3.8% to 3%, which was a savings of $75,000. Closing the bathroom and parking at Stephen J. Underwood Park would save $40,000, and then finally we would arrive at staff layoffs and furloughs. Moving on to the development fund. So there actually is other funds besides the general fund to briefly discuss. The development fund is where community development and projects and public works, projects that Public Works also works on that are funded by user fees, fees for developers. This was started, I think, I forget the year if it's 2017. It was started with $1.5 million from the general fund to separate this out. And the idea is that as the development and construction markets, you know, rise and fall, this is positioned to be able to respond to those falls and increases quickly. So the budget here shows an ending fund balance in 2025 of almost $700,000, and then in 2026 about $370,000. In 2027 we're still in the green above zero on this schedule, about $94,000. But we do have knowledge of about 5 large projects coming down the pipe. So this is a downward trend, but the development activity is just not linear. So it's good news that we see green, you know, and being above zero for 2025 and 2026, and we do expect things to pick up. So we're not nearly as concerned about the red here as we would be on the general fund forecast in those outer years of 2028 through 2031. The marina, we're now to the funds that have money. The marina is doing well, so their budget, their ending net position is along that green row there, which would be in 2025, $1.755 million, and then in 2026, a little over $2 million. The capital improvements are listed underneath. And you notice under the budget 2025 column, you see the $13.7 million. That is the marina dock replacement that we're expecting to occur late next year. So their ending net position at the end of 2024 is expected to be $16.5 million, and then you see in 2025 1.7 million. So that's the reason for that large decrease, is the expenditure of those funds. And those funds, of course, come from the 2023 bonds. And the marina is responsible for repayment of that portion of the bonds. And lastly, surface water management. You can see they have a total change there that is negative, but they also do a lot of capital work, which would be responsible for that. Their ending net position would be a little over 27 million, and in 2026, almost 27 million. But it's important to remember that their net position consists of assets that that fund owns. So that's assets that involve all the pipes in the city. So it's not that they have $27 million in cash. They have closer to $10 million of cash, but they also own a lot of stuff, and that increases the amount of their net position. And this is the list of capital improvements that they are planning in the next few years. That is included in the forecast. This information comes from the capital improvement plan, which was approved last month by council, which can also be found on the finance website, webpage on the city website. If you want to know how a project's being paid for, where the funding is coming from, I'd recommend looking at the capital improvements plan. You can find a page dedicated to a project that'll show you, if it's funded with debt proceeds, if it's funded by a grant. And so looking at this, in 2025, surface water management is scheduled to expend about $2.1 million on capital project and about $2.5 million in 2026. And we are to the motion.
I just want to add a couple things. So obviously this is a public hearing, so there'll be an opportunity for questions. But we're also going to make Jeff available starting next week because there's probably a lot more questions that you might not want to ask tonight, as you kind of digest the budget and the presentations and really just, kind of walking through the budget with him if you'd like, so we can start setting those up next week. Another thing that we had that I think might have dropped out at some point on this is some potential revenue opportunities that we're currently working on. One is the warehouse tax, that we're going to be bringing that back for first reading on November 21st, which has the potential to raise anywhere between $600,000 to $800,000 a year. So that's a significant amount that we can start looking at for the budget. Additionally, Proposition 1, that wasn't mentioned. That's not included in the budget. If that were to pass, we would have additional revenue coming into for public safety purposes. So those were two things that weren't mentioned, but are potentials. So I just wanted to mention those.
All right. So now it's time for the public comment portion of the public hearing. So did we receive any? Okay, I'll finish this though for my intro. So if there is anyone who comes forward, please keep your comments respectful and understand that anyone speaking or acting in a disrespectful manner will be asked to leave the meeting. Please state your name and city of residence, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak should you decide to come forward. Is there anyone, so we don't have anybody who signed up for this portion of the meeting to give public comment. Is there anyone who didn't sign up to speak but wishes to speak? Okay. Second time, is there anyone who did not sign up to speak who wishes to speak? And third time, is there anyone who didn't sign up to speak who wishes to speak? All right. So now it's time for council questions. So council, do you have any questions for the finance director? Please, questions only. I'll start with Deputy Mayor Steinmetz and then Councilmember Mahoney.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you for a really terrific presentation. A lot of great information, but a lot to digest as well. One of the things that I don't understand very well is the retaining the one-time tax in the general fund. Yeah. Where does the $275,000 come from? Is that a historical number? And could you project that out every year? I just
no.
trying to understand how that works.
That I talk to community development and get a feel for what projects are out there. The last few years, there's been 2 main projects, so we were able to look at the historical data, kind of get a feel for what to expect. We don't really have that with these new projects coming on, but given that there was 5 of them and looking at what the historical revenue has been, that was just a kind of a safe estimate in our view. So that would come in to the general fund through sales tax, and instead of going out, it would just stay.
Is there any interplay between that money and the development fund? It seems like they're kind of doing the same thing. It's about big capital projects. But I'm not,
No.
and I'm just trying to understand, because I don't really.
So there is a part of community development that is in the general fund, and that's for projects that are funded through taxes. So that's why the taxes are going in the general fund, and the development fund, which is separate, is fee-based. So that's running by fees. So that's why the taxes are going into the general fund.
Okay, then I get the distinction. Thank you.
Councilmember Mahoney.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm obviously very aware of all these numbers here and have been for some time, being chair of the Finance Committee. But one that caught my eye is on page 242 of the book. It's the city council expenses, and I know you guys have been scrubbing everywhere to find money. My question is that we had budgeted just shy of 96,000, and it's projected that we'll spend almost 181,000.
Okay.
Now, and particularly in the service and pass-through portion, that's over $105,000. What is that?
That's a good question. Typically, I would need to know which account you're looking at, but council expense.
It's the city council expenditures, it's the city council portion of the budget.
Right, so city council expenditures typically are travel, training, publications, and then the stipends that council members receive for their work.
So is there the possibility that we should, look at stipends and expenses? No, I know stipends here and expenses here, but I'm talking categorically supplies too. A lot of times we're getting these paper documents. As leaders of this community, we should also be accountable to possibly looking at our expenses. And since I know it's only $180,000, but over the next 2 years, we have $120,000 in each one, and that's almost $250,000. That's a couple officers, that's a couple less furloughs potential. So is there a possibility we could, one, know what this money is and where it went, and then also can we look at it as possibly maybe cutting this back some too, so we are partners in these reductions in the budget?
Yeah, finance could provide that information, and we'll never argue against cuts if they're wise cuts.
Okay, it was just the one, because when we'd had the meeting, and I think June or May, you showed us, it was a little over, but this is a lot more over, and that's why it caught my eye. Thank you.
Councilmember Nutting.
I guess to dovetail with Councilmember Mahoney's question would be, has our stipends increased over the last year? Are we increasing our stipends, or are we increasing expenditures?
The stipends have been stable.
Okay.
Because the per meeting earnings, so it would have been, expenditures would have increased.
In expenditures, okay. Well, I agree with Councilmember Mahoney then.
Any other questions? Councilmember Oxiger and then Councilmember Harris.
You mentioned that there were 5 projects.
Right.
That you thought were coming on. Can you elaborate on what those projects are?
Yeah, and if I can't name them all, I think we have the department here. I think there's another phase with Wesley. There's Highline. I think there was project that came back to life, which would be over the 15 million. There's the Business Park West, and well, Dan Hopp was.
Middle school is one.
Yeah, Pacific, the middle school, so that was 4, and I'm not clear on the 5th.
I don't know if it would have been the Masonicom. Was that something, or?
No, I don't think so. We can provide the 5th, but those are 4 of the 5.
Sorry, okay, and so if this gets back to the question on the council expenditures and stuff, if the stipends have remained stable, what exactly have we been spending the additional funds on?
That would have been training, travel, publications. The consultants, I think, for example, hiring the city manager through the search firm was charged to the city council.
We can get those numbers.
Yeah.
Pardon? We can get detail.
Okay, so if we're charging, it was an expensive process to go through to hire the city manager, so that's a one-time only, expenditure. Or intermittent, right? Hopefully not.
Yeah.
So anyway, that skews that number. So going forward, we're certainly not looking at that high of expenditures.
I shouldn't. So, but we can provide the detailed transaction information.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Harris.
And I echo my colleagues. Thank you. There's only one hardest working man in showbiz, but you're a close second, and thank you. You've been doing a lot of these events. There was a cut for a budget subscription. It's like 40K, or what is that?
Well, first of all, that's the only time in my life I'll ever be compared to James Brown. Secondly, the budget software subscription, we have started using the last couple budgets. So it's been a couple of years, starting in 2023. It's called ClearGov. It's an arduous process to manually put a budget book together, because it is, as you see, about 300 pages. This program was the least expensive, the most intuitive, and it's good. And it has a CIP module for the capital improvements program. It has a couple other modules, but it publishes your book, and so that is the $40,000 a year cost. What I found this year is going through the process of putting that book together. We didn't have our data all in the same place. We had our salaries and benefits in our accounting software. We had directors input everything else into the ClearGov system. I had them in both places, got them together. And honestly, there's some presentation issues that I don't care for. Some schedules I'd rather present differently. And as we were in the final days of putting the book together this year, there was some functionality that just disappeared, which was frustrating. So I had a lack of control, and I have data in different places. And though it's cheap and then the product is good and we need to find savings in the budget, it just made sense to go to a model I'm thinking of where we have all of the data in the accounting software. I can put it together manually. I'll have next year to put templates together. And then so it will be a smoother process that I hope during the process by October 1st, I have a budget book instead of submitting something on October 1st and then spending weeks putting together a book and then you get it later. So I think there's a process improvement and there's cost savings combined with that reduction.
Cool. I just assumed that 40,000 made it faster, but well done.
Yeah, well, it does in some ways, but.
That's just, no, I mean, was this done with ClearGov?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well then, I won't even, Is there, what is the possibility of, on the various funds, adding what comprises the beginning net position? I just get asked that all the time, is that, I think you know what I'm asking, and
Yeah,
how much work would it be? Is that a lot of work? I was hoping that was one thing that could be automated at some point. So people could see 12 million in pipe and 4 million in.
That is a net position. It's like, is a form of equity. It's equity. So it's like how you have equity in your house. It's your assets less your liabilities. So that's typically you see it at the bottom of an income statement, but your balance sheet shows you those assets and liabilities.
Yeah, no, I just meant just as just people see the ginormous number.
Right.
And they, and I imagine like a little button you'd click and it just accordions open and says, like I said, it's 12 million in pipe and it's 3 million in whatever. And I was hoping the software could provide that kind of thing at some point. But just because people ask about it like more than I had hoped. And the only other thing, question I have is, the other thing I get asked all the time is, that 16.67, it seems almost like Excalibur. And so people want to know not so much why, but like a specific use case for that amount. So I'm just, if you wouldn't mind, do you have something like?
Explain the 16 point?
No, just like people really want to know, like, what would be a use for it if you had it that you would draw into on a temporary basis, rather than just keeping it at that?
Well, I mean, it's a minimum threshold so that you can cover 2 months of expenses. That's the thinking. So if you go below that, then you're essentially saying you don't have enough resources to last 2 months. So if you were to go under that threshold, as we saw in the forecasts, it's only because you lack revenue or expenditure cuts.
Okay, no, I don't, I'm not, just, in other words, I'll get asked, like, we had this landslide several years ago, and people would want to know, well, would we just need to cut a check for $200,000 one night, and would that be the use for it? Or they just want to have some kind of
in organizations I've worked for, the philosophy or the attitude would be you just never touch that if you can avoid it. So that would be, I guess, a financial response to the question is, it better be good if you want to go below your minimum threshold.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to, it's just repeating a question I get asked a lot. Thank you so much, sir.
Councilmember Grace Matsui.
Hello.
Oh.
Thank you so much for coming again in 48 hours, giving another presentation about the budget. I'm pretty sure you could nearly do this in your sleep. First of all, I want to say thank you. I think this is the first time that I've seen the budget for the city of Des Moines with this level of detail cut into subject by the departments, given their accomplishments, their mission for the next year. I believe if we had something like a budget book last year, it might have been 30 pages long. And this is more on par with what I would expect to see from a very transparent government. And so I want to say thank you so much to you and your staff for leading us to this point, because this really gives that level of detail so that folks can take a look at where the money is going and why, and start to look at why is it going this way. We've said many, many times that a budget is a statement of our values, and it really does show this. I'm getting there.
Okay.
Yep, thank you. Mhm.
I was enjoying that.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, he was enjoying that. I did want to say that there are some points about position control that I'm interested in. So it looks like the part-time positions are indicated by that point FTE, but is there a way to also add into to make sure that they know that these other boxes are one FTE, or is there a position list in here?
Well, there is a position list.
Okay.
So it would go by department, and then you'd have each job title, and then how many FTEs is that job title.
Okay. And does it also tell you the changes? This is the first time I'm holding it.
Okay.
The changes between the 2024, 2025, plus or
Yes,
minus?
that schedule has prior years, and so you can see what's changed.
So the proposal, if someone, and is this posted online?
Yes, it's on the finance website.
Awesome. So folks can go, look it up, and see what those proposed changes are.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Just to help answer the question, on pages 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, that's where the information was.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay. Well, I had a few questions that I got to cross off, and if it feels good, Jeff, it is pretty amazing. I just want to say it is very impressive. It's beautiful, and thank you for putting the effort forward and getting it out for everybody to, anybody in the community who wants to print this out can go down to the print place and get it done. So thank you. Great job. Great job. All right. So I will now close the public hearing. Do it. Well, okay, I looked down the line, and I will undo it if you have a question.
Thank you. Sorry, Jeff, to make you come
Yeah,
back up.
sorry.
Or maybe this is, I know. Before I continue, I want to reiterate that, this has been a tremendous amount of work, and it's extremely appreciated. It's been phenomenal.
Appreciate that.
Compared to what we've done in the past, so. But we do mention in here staff layoffs and furloughs.
Right.
There's no number attached to that. What is it that we are expecting, services that we're doing now that we're not going to be able to provide if we bring this budget into balance? And I will cite that one of the earlier, I forget which one of the presentations we had before, had to do with possible elimination of community events, that sort of thing. So, what sorts of things are we calculating that we're not going to be able to do?
Yeah, so I think we have the plan, which was what Jeff talked about, of putting that number in there, right? The budget deficit number as as cuts, right? And so we're kind of working with a concept of a plan at this point.
Sorry.
And so really that's, we've been collecting information from the public, right? We had our town hall meeting. We have these public hearings. We're working with the council, get your input. We also have our new city manager starting November 1st. And so part of this is just data collection as we move into the new year, knowing that there's a specific number that we need to reach, and that number will be refined as we move forward. And so we essentially put these in as placeholders for cuts that would be made in the first quarter. And so we don't have specific positions, we don't have specific programs identified at the moment, but we're going to take all this input, we'll work with Catherine as she gets here, and we'll really leave those decisions for her and for the city council to be made, recognizing that there will be a number, but we're continuing to try to get that number as low as possible.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Harris.
To Councilmember Oxiger's point, the book shows what is, and to the extent, forgive it. It doesn't show you what is not, and to the extent possible.
Questions.
I'm getting, is there, how much work? Every question I ask is like, how much work is it? Because that's really, how much work would it be to provide some kind of what I'd call a difference document, essentially where those placeholders are going to be relative to, you know, this year and into the future. I mean, that's just.
I'm not sure I'm clear on the.
It would be, okay, I'll ask you, I'm trying to find some kind of comparison between years that will make it easy for the public to understand at least which departments are getting trimmed and by how much, just recognizing that those are placeholders.
Yeah, the budget book does have at least the 2023 prior year in there, so they can at least compare 2023 projected 2024 and then look at, you know, the budgeted numbers.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Are you sure? Okay. Yeah, all right. I'll now close the public hearing. So do I have a motion? Deputy Mayor Steinmetz for the motion.
I move to pass draft ordinance number 24-089 to a second reading on November 21st, 2024, for further city council consideration and approval.
I have a second. Looks like Councilmember Nutting. And let's see here, discussion. So, any discussion, comments? Councilmember Mahoney?
Saving my comments for now. Basically, you guys did strong work. I know it was the entire city staff work. This is a very difficult situation. It's economics. Our costs have gone up. Some people have said, oh, how can you pay your staff so much? And things along those lines, but they don't understand the negotiation, the inflation, and some of the other things we're doing with some of the labor groups and so forth. They were the right thing to do because we have great people. We want to keep them here. No matter what ends up in this budget, and I understand we're trying to get to the lowest number we possibly can, and that's what I'm looking for every dollar we can find, is that we want to minimize the impact of our employees here, the staff, but yet we want to somehow protect public safety as much as we can. So this is going to be a very difficult thing, and unfortunately, I think in a lot of cases, you're not going to notice a difference till next year. And then it'll be something that'll happen, and this will be the reason why. You can't particularly get a service on something, or there's additional time delays on something because they don't have the resources. These are just the realities that we'll face as we move forward.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion? Well, I've got a couple pages of questions, so that'll be in the for you in the future when I get my appointment, Jeff. So maybe I'll bring you a cup of tea or something. Thank you to the public, though, who has been particularly engaged, like Jeff mentioned. Coming out to meetings, offering suggestions, especially those who participated both through the CAC, the Citizens Advisory Committee, and the Budget Town Hall. So lots of input that we've received, so we're listening, considering thoughtfully how to address these challenges. We really, really are wanting to get through this with as little bumps and don't want to swamp the boat or sink kind of. Well, that's not going to happen. I think we're going to come out more resilient and strong. It's going to be okay. So take it to a vote. All in favor for passing to a second reading, raise your right hand, 7-0. Awesome. Passes to a second reading. Thank you. All right, it's time for new business, and the first item on new business is a water utility tax subject. So the purpose of this item is for the council to consider a tax on water utilities. And we have a staff presentation by Matt Hutchins.
Thank you, Mayor. And good evening, Mayor and Council. Matthew Hutchins, Acting City Attorney for the next 6 business days. The staff presentation on draft ordinance 24-083. So back in 2015-16, the city of Des Moines was facing some serious budget issues. And one idea that was floated at that time was to increase revenue by imposing a 16% utility tax on water and sewer districts, excuse me, operating in the city. There's a little bit of a complication with that in that there was a dispute going on in that time, working through the Washington courts about whether that was actually a tax that could be imposed on water and sewer districts. The districts said, we're governments, we're immune from taxes, and the city's positions was, you are acting as a business in this capacity, and yes, we can. But because this dispute was still live, the city and several of the districts in the city negotiated a settlement, essentially, where the franchise agreements would be amended to have the utility districts pay a 6% franchise payment in lieu of a tax, and the city would agree not to impose a tax. The Lake Haven, at that time, had already negotiated to not have a tax imposed on them, and Water District 54 declined the opportunity to essentially pay for the immunity from a future tax. Since then, the Washington Supreme Court came out with a resounding answer to the question, yes, the cities were right, we can impose a tax. So given that we do clearly have this authority, Draft Ordinance 24-083 proposes to impose a 6% utility tax on water purveyors, but only if they do not have a franchise agreement that we've agreed not to impose a tax. Obviously, at first that would just apply to Water District 54, but as franchise agreements expire, if the exemptions are not extended, the tax would apply at that point. As you can see, the anticipated revenue would be about $88,000 per year to start. Now, as to the rest of my presentation, Ms. Barashkov actually covered it all pretty well. I pretty much agree with it completely. 54 has reached out to us and asked to have a conversation about this tax, and one of the things they want to talk about is potentially amending their franchise agreement to put them on par with Highline and the others who have agreed to a fee agreement. We agree this is an excellent idea, and as such, we are recommending that this be passed to November 21st, and depending on how the discussions go, the council could opt either to impose a tax or not, or perhaps we would be bringing you a amendment of the franchise agreement. So we have a recommended motion.
Thank you. Do we have any questions before the motion? Councilmember Oxiger.
So what I'm hung up on here is the second reading. If what would be the difference if we were to simply postpone this until that point? Because if you go to second reading, it's like the process is in play already. And I note that we're not doing this with our discussions with Lake Haven, which was some of the information that came out earlier. You know, I think that the fact that we're already in the process of doing this, it is kind of like a gun to the heads of people that, you know, you will negotiate type thing. It just seems a little over the top to be continuing this process at this point, rather than just allowing it to happen on its own. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I guess I would say that all we're doing is moving it to the next meeting. So you're not passing anything tonight. And if there is but it does it sets a deadline, right? So let's get to the table, let's get an agreement, let's bring it back to council. Writing an amendment to a franchise agreement to include a 6% franchise payment, we should be able to wrap that up next week. There's not really a lot of back and forth. We can have it mirror the existing franchise agreements. We can cut and paste it So our recommendation would be, we kick this out 3 to 4 weeks. We come back, and if we have the franchise agreement, we'll just pull that off, and we'll put the franchise agreement on. I don't think there's a threat there. It's just that we had proposed the utility tax. We notified the water district. They notified us that they would like to negotiate a franchise amendment. I think it's a great outcome, but we need to do it. We need to do it promptly.
Okay, and are we doing the same thing with regard to Lake Haven?
So Lake Haven has an agreement that we cannot impose a utility tax through 2031. So we are going to ask them if they would like to amend their agreement, but they don't have to do that because we've waived it through 2031, which we did not do with Water District 54.
And we are definitely going to ask them.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions before the motion? Councilmember Grace Matsui and then Councilmember Harris.
I do agree. I think that with Councilmember Oxiger's comments, that this really is not in sync with a process that we may be doing with the other utilities. I would also like to highlight some of the differences that Commissioner Broshkoff made that are very significant, and that is the difference between a utility tax on a commodity sale or revenue that's based on a commodity sale versus total income. And if we were to continue with a franchise agreement on total income, which may or may not be the case with our other franchise agreements, that is actually a pass-through tax that does hurt development in this town, because we collect more, water districts, sewer districts collect more than just commodity sales. And so basically, including gross revenue as part of this franchise or utility tax passes through that 6% cost onto every developer in the downtown core. And is that something that we would like to do when we're encouraging development here? So I would very much like to review and take a look at whether or not it should be gross revenue, or if it should exempt connection charges, or it should be on commodities only. Because the detriment, if you look at something like the Adriana, would have raised their cost to come in here by 6%.
Yeah, and I think we're all on the same page. I mean, we got an email from Brian Snurr, who's legal counsel for Water District 54, saying that they would like to amend their franchise agreement to include the exact same language that we have in the other agreements, which included the language that you're talking about. And we said, absolutely, let's talk. Let's work it out. And so yes, hearing it from you, hearing it from the president, we're in agreement. That's what the franchise agreement, it would be great if we could do that. We haven't done that for 6 years since we negotiated the last ones. We proposed a utility tax. Now Water District 54 has come to the table. So I think we're in a great position.
I don't think maybe I didn't articulate my question correctly. I think that, let me see if I can get to it. If there is an active negotiation that is happening and could be wrapped up in a week, why does there need to be a motion to move forward an ordinance that would contradict the terms of the negotiation that we're trying to deal and cut with a water district?
Yeah, I think it provides some urgency. The council has the authority to impose a utility tax based on gross revenue, based on whatever the council would like to. We have negotiated agreements that exempt some revenue. And so, yes, we'll be moving forward with those negotiations. If the council doesn't want to pass this to a second reading, council doesn't have to. So, council's call.
And I would just want to make clear that what we're asking to do is just not take any action today and just leave the question for November 21st. The council at that point doesn't even have to take action. It could be pushed again.
Yes, I've heard this multiple times, that moving something to a second reading is not an action, and I vehemently disagree. Moving something means that we are considering it and we approve of it and we'll think about it again in the same form. Taking no action means not having an ordinance reading and not voting on an ordinance. So when someone says, oh, you know, when we're just moving it to a second reading, we don't have to do it in that second reading, that is still an action.
Councilmember, so she made a statement. Did you have a question? No, I don't. Okay. Councilmember Harris, do you have a question before the motion? Because we are going to have time for a discussion after the motion.
This is a question of mechanics of parliamentary procedure. Councilmember Grace Matsui's point is well taken in that I'm struggling in my mind to formulate a motion that modifies this to the extent that something happens at our next meeting, but is predicated on the negotiation that you're talking about with Brian. And I don't know how to get there in a parliamentary fashion, so that's, you know, I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth, but I would like some kind of parliamentary guarantee that what comes back on the 21st complies with what I'm hearing verbally, I guess. It would be lovely to have had a piece of paper to that effect. And, you know, that's all I got. Can you suggest a way to get there?
Well, I guess, so we used to require 2 readings on ordinances, right, unless you waive something. So if you were to set this over, so we're not passing it to a second reading, we're setting it over to November 21st for additional consideration, you could still, I mean, see, that's where I'm not getting the distinction between the two, because you could still pass it on, you could pass it tonight if you wanted to, because we don't require that second reading, so. But, yeah, so I guess, yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Just a second. You're next. So when we use the word draft in our motion, that means that it's subject to editing and amendment, whether it's a draft letter, a draft ordinance, a draft resolution. The word draft means that this is not the final wording, concept, points. Is that true? Is that why we use the word draft?
Correct. It is a document that is still living at that point, and until it is passed by a majority of the council, it is not final.
Okay, so anytime we move to pass a draft anything, it means in that interim, it's subject to change before it comes back. That's why we say draft. Is that true?
I would say that's
okay.
fair, yes.
So if we do move to pass this draft ordinance, it means that we're moving to pass it with the idea that it could be changed.
Yes, it is still very susceptible to change. May I don't know if this would make anyone more comfortable, but if we were to change the motion to just put this agenda item on the November 21st regular council agenda, would that make people more comfortable? That would not be, you know, putting any sort of positive stamp on it. It would just be clear that it will be considered at that time.
So in other words, we act as if this was a presentation tonight in new business with the idea that we're going to have a motion that's going to come forward on the 21st, and because we don't have a procedure or council rule that says that we have to have 2 readings, we could pass it in 1 reading if it's sufficient for us at that time. Is that what you're saying?
Right, just we consider the item closed today, and then we bring the same item back on the 21st.
Okay.
To me, that accomplishes the same thing, but does not say we are passing this to a later date.
Okay, so what we have before the council is an option to make this motion or not. And I don't think we need to, do we just need a head nod if we want to say we want to put something on an agenda? So we get 3 council members to agree to put something on an agenda for November 21st? Okay, two questions. Councilmember Oxiger and then Councilmember Grace Matsui.
Well, hence my earlier question is it to assure that it does appear on the coming agenda that we simply postpone to that date? Postpone this action to that date. That's way it's not just a head nod or anything, it's like, this is what is going on.
If 3 council members agree that they want something on an agenda, correct?
Yeah.
Correct. 3 council members have to nod their head to agree, and then something goes on the agenda. And also the city manager and the mayor can put something on agenda. So, Councilmember Grace Matsui and then Councilmember Harris.
Well, I guess I'm going back to what is the necessity of voting on this ordinance if the parties are at the table and we've accomplished substantially what we wanted to do with this ordinance in the next 5 days?
If we do have successful negotiations, then it may not be necessary to do it. And I think we would, probably pull it and bring a alternative item for consideration.
Is that the answer? Are you good with that answer? Okay. Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, I would just like the direction to be that the city bring back a memo of understanding or some sort of piece of paper that says that there is agreement between the 2 agencies. And if there's a vote necessary, great. If not, I'd still like to see that piece of paper. Is that something we could agree on? Doable?
Are you asking these 2 gentlemen?
I'm asking the city attorney if that sounds like a logical path forward.
Well, no, I mean, a franchise amendment requires council approval. So, yeah, I guess our position is just, we're either requesting a utility tax or a franchise amendment. So how do we get there? That's where we're at.
Council, okay, is this questions? I'm still taking questions before the motion. I'm waiting.
No, it's a comment, but we've all been commenting, so I've been trying to hold till we were ready for comment.
Okay, and I guess I don't really want to open for a motion. So is it protocol to go ahead and have discussion before the motion if we're not going to have one? Okay, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, I mean, this concept of the utility tax with, or a utility franchise agreement or fee, it's been around for 6 years and it just hasn't happened. We have the ability to impose the tax. We would probably rather do the fee. I think it's better for everybody. But the only way we keep this going forward is to move the idea of the tax on to the next step. And if an amendment to that point is deemed to be the right thing to do, whether it's an amendment for a franchise fee or it is an amendment that clarifies what exactly is the revenue that's being taxed, we can do that next time. But you got to keep the process moving if we're going to get everybody at the table willing to negotiate now. And we're going to do one or the other. We need to resolve this issue. And we have the ability to do that right now. So let's keep the process moving forward.
Hey, Councilmember Grace Matsui, did you have something? So how many council members do we need to direct, if we want to, let's say, direct staff to bring back an agreement on November 21st? 3 council members to ask for that?
An agreement?
Can I attempt to make the motion, please? Because I think it'll it'll solve things.
All right.
I move to direct staff to bring back on November 21st, either a proposal for the 6% utility tax or an amended agreement for the franchise agreement between Water District 54 and the city.
Do I have a second? Councilmember Mahoney for the second discussion. Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, I think that motion's fine. I would support that.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, all in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Yes. So good. All right. New agenda items for consideration. This is a time for the purpose of proposing new business items for discussion on a future agenda that also have not been previously before the council. This is not a time for council action or questions about old business. Council members can submit questions or seek updates on previously discussed business to the city manager at any time. Do council members have new business they would like to propose? All right. Quick. Moving forward to council member reports. Now, we have about 10 minutes. So I'm actually going to ask maybe to only pick a couple of things. Super quick, couple of sentences, way less than 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, so we'll start with Councilmember Grace Matsui.
Thank you. All right. So a couple of things I wanted to highlight. I am the liaison to the Senior Services Advisory Committee, and I had the opportunity to stop by their confidential paper shred event, which is also and always well attended. I was able to lift some boxes. Jeff let me actually lift some boxes and put them in a shred bin, so that was good. I certainly helped. I'm sure he appreciated all of that, but he really did all the heavy lifting. And I want to say thanks to our partnership with Recology. They don't provide the shredding while we're there, but they provide the recycle bins that we throw the bags and boxes and other things into as people drive by and hand you their shred materials. And it was awesome to see folks out. And it just so happened to be a beautiful day that day, too, so it was great to be out there. I attended the Lighthouse Northwest fundraising dinner on Saturday in support of domestic violence awareness and all of the programs that Lighthouse Northwest puts on. It is a great organization that I'm happy to support, and they put on an excellent event down at the beach park. And then, just 48 hours later, I was at the beach park again with Jeff to talk about the budget town hall meeting and see the folks really interact with the budget dollar activity that AJ helped facilitate about how folks would prioritize if they had a budget that they could go in and talk to each of the stations. And I want to say thank you to the staff for attending and answering questions at your station. It seemed like there were some lively discussions there. Thank you very much, and I will pass that on.
Thank you. Councilmember Nutting.
No remarks tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Oxiger.
Thank you, Mayor. On the 17th of October, the police department went to Redondo for a meet and greet, and there were approximately 20 people there, and a lot of the questions, of course, it being in Redondo, had to do with the speed camera implementation and traffic, various, subjects down there that are of interest to the community specifically. And then the discussion came up about the levee lid lift. And I'm glad you came back in, Chief Bo, because I wanted to congratulate you on, there is a presentation that was put out, a fact sheet put out, by the city that had some statements in it as to definitively what would happen and would not happen regarding to whether the levee lid lift passes. And as he correctly pointed out, those definitive statements can't be made because it's up to this council as to which of them would actually happen. and how that, we collectively would decide on these things. So I wanted to thank him, personally for that. That was extremely enlightening, and it's unfortunate that the fact sheet, does not comport with that. And also, another thing with the fact sheet, I would point out that in the future that it is required, the same requirements are there as are with sponsor ID on any political advertising, is that it has to be indicated, and unfortunately it's not indicated on that flyer as to who this is coming from. And I've been getting a lot of remarks from the public saying, who's saying this? So just a notation of what's going on. But anyway, thank you again, Chief.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
No remarks.
All right, Councilmember Mahoney.
A couple reminders, trunk or treat, October 28th at SJU, at Stephen J. Underwood Park. October 31st, and I may be stealing this from Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, but there's the trick or treat path on downtown. A few of us of the council will be at the theater. Bring your candy. There's going to be a Veterans Day event November 11th up at Stephen J. Underwood as well. The theme this year will be, the speakers will be service members, family members, because as a veteran myself, my parents miss me deeply, and I found out the same thing with my son, and I want a few people to talk about that perspective, so it'll be interesting. Plus, come and honor your veterans. The Scouts do a great flag ceremony at 11:11 a.m. And Tim, I wholeheartedly thank you for your service. When we had this conversation about a long time ago about you, well, a year ago, right, or around there, of you entering into the interim position, you've done it with stellar excellence, and I commend you for it, and I thank you wholeheartedly. And the last thing I got to say is, don't defund your police. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
I'll try to talk very, very fast. I'm the DDM liaison, Destination Des Moines, and yes, there's a trick-or-treat path. Thanks, Matt. Sound Cities Association had a wonderful event that I attended on coming together. They had a member of the de Klerk government, which was the white apartheid government in South Africa, and a member of the negotiation team through the African National Congress that was on the other side, and they talked about how they were able to bridge that gap. The takeaway is there is no substitute for building trust than having face-to-face conversations. And as you know, Mayor Buxton and I have been out there trying to have face-to-face conversations with as many people as we possibly can, and we're going to continue doing that. And there just is no substitute for it. Thirdly is that, Proposition 1 is out there. There is a mailer that arrived at my house today that, calls us cowards, that makes lots of statements about how we should have started doing this process sooner. I remind everybody, the budget deficit was identified when we were starting on the 2024 budget in the fall of 2023. That's how long the city and the council has been working to try to solve some of these problems. And one of the solutions to that is Proposition 1, because that's the only way you can ensure that your police department will be immune from various cuts. So, and then lastly, I do want to say thanks to Tim. I think you have done just an absolutely stellar job. I thought you were a good choice just to sort of keep the waters calm, and the waters didn't agree. And you handled that with absolute professionalism and really quite well. And I appreciate that very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. All right. We've had a busy couple weeks. Some of the highlights, I had my 42nd wedding anniversary. Very, thank you. A lot of hard work. I say it's been a lot of hard work. It's not a Hallmark movie, but we're best friends, and I appreciate his support. So I've been putting out a Mayor's Minute every couple weeks. It's a little newsletter from the mayor. I hope you can catch that on the city website or on social pages. About the levy, we can't change yesterday, but we can move forward from today and be strong. We've been listening. We can't change everything now, but we're responding concerns one at a time. We're working hard. Coming up, Saturday, November 2nd, holiday market at the Beach Park, 10 to 4. Tuesday, November 5th, election date, vote. Wednesday, November 13th, 6 p.m., the SAMP presentation at Mount Rainier High School. This concludes our meeting for this evening. The next meeting date will be November 14th, the City Council Study Session. It's a Vision, Mission, Values Retreat. Please remember to pick up after yourself on your way out. Councilmember Grace Matsu.
I move we adjourn.
All right. Second? All right, all in favor? Woohoo!